Shalom, welcome back. We're going to be continuing on as we work our way through the Rock of a Sure Foundation. We're in the Nazarene Acts, book 8. We're up to chapter 13. It says, "Now in the meantime that this visible world has been made, very many wise men among the philosophers do testify. But so that we will not seem to make use of assertions as witnesses, as if we needed them, let us inquire, if you please, concerning its principles. That this visible world is material is sufficiently evident from the fact that it is visible. But everybody receives one of two differentia, for it is either compact and solid or divided and separate. And if the body of which the world was made was compact and solid, and that body was parted and divided through diverse species and parts according to its differences, there must necessarily be understood to have been someone to separate the body which was compact and solid, and to draw it into many parts and diverse forms. Or, if all this mass of the world was compounded and compacted from diverse and dispersed parts of bodies, still there must be understood to have been some one to collect into one the dispersed parts, and to invest these things with their different species. And indeed, I know that several of the philosophers were rather of this opinion, that God the Creator made divisions and distinctions from one body, which they call matter, which yet consisted of four elements, mingled into one by a certain tempering of divine providence. For I think that what some have said is vain, that the body of the world is simple, that is, without any conjunction, since it is evident that what is simple can neither be a body, nor can it be mixed or propagated or dissolved, all which we see happen to the bodies of the world. For how could it be dissolved if it were simple, and had not within it that from which it might be resolved and divided? But if bodies seem to be composed of two or three or even four elements, who that has even a small portion of sense does not perceive that there must have been someone who collected several into one, and preserving the measure of tempering, made a solid body out of diverse parts. This someone, therefore, we call Yahweh, the Creator of the world, and acknowledge him as the author of the universe. For the Greek philosophers, inquiring into the beginnings of the world, have gone some in one way and some in another. In short, Pythagoras says that numbers are the element of its beginnings. Callistratus, that qualities. Alcmaeon, that contrarieties. Anaximander, that immensity. Anaxagoras, that equalities of parts. Epicurus, that atoms. Diodorus, that some Greek word, that is things in which there are no parts. Asclepius, that, and again another Greek word I don't know, which we may call tumors or swelling. The geometricians, that ends. Democritus, that ideas. Thales, that water. Heracles, that fire. Diogenes, that air. Parmenides, that earth. Zeno, Empedocles, and Plato, that fire, water, and earth. Aristotle also introduces a fifth element, which he calls that which cannot be named, without doubt indicating him who made the world by joining the four elements into one. Whether, therefore, there be two or three or four or more, or innumerable elements of which the world consists, in every supposition there is shown to be a God, who collected many into one, and again drew them, when collected, into diverse species. And by this it is proved that the machine of the world could not have subsisted without a maker and disposer. But from this fact also, that in the conjunction of the elements, if one be deficient or in excess, the others are loosened and fall, it is shown that they took their beginning from nothing. For example, moisture be wanting in any body, neither will dry stand, for dry is fed by moisture, and also cold by heat, in which, as we have said, if one be defective, the whole are dissolved. And in this they give indications of their origin, that they were made out of nothing. Now if matter itself is proved to have been made, how shall its parts and its species, of which the world consists, be thought to be unmade? But about matter and its qualities this is not the time to speak. Only let it suffice to have taught this, that God, the creator of all things, because neither of the body which the world consists was solid and united, could have been separated and distinguished without a creator, nor if it was collected into one from the diverse and separate parts, could it be collected and mixed without a maker. Therefore, if God is so clearly shown to be the creator of the world, what room is there for Epicurus to introduce atoms and to assert that not only sensible bodies, but even intellectual and rational minds are made of insensible corpuscles? But you will say, according to the opinion of Epicurus, that successions of atoms coming into a ceaseless course and mixing with one another and conglomerating through unlimited and endless periods of time are made solid bodies. I do not treat this opinion as a pure fiction, and that too a badly contrived one, but let us examine it, whether it be character, and see if what is said can stand. For they say that those corpuscles which they call atoms are of different qualities, that some are moist and therefore heavy and tending downwards, others dry and earthy and therefore still heavy, but others fiery and therefore always pushing upwards, and others cold and inert and always remaining in the middle. Since then some, as being fiery, always tend upward, and others, as being moist and dry, always downwards, and others keep a middle and unequal course, how could they meet together and form one body? For if anyone throw down from a height a small piece of straw, for example, and pieces of lead of the same size, will the light straws be able to keep up with the pieces of lead, though they be equal in size? Nay, the heavier reach the bottom more quickly. So also atoms, though they be equal in size, yet being unequal in weight, the lighter will never be able to keep pace with the heavier, and if they cannot keep pace, certainly neither can they be mixed or form one body. Then in the next place, if they are ceaselessly borne about, and always coming, and being added to things whose measure is already complete, how can the universe stand when new weights are always being heaped upon so vast weights? And this also I ask, if this expanse of heaven which we see was constructed by the gradual concurrence of atoms, how did it not collapse while it was in construction? And if indeed the yawning top of the structure was not propped and bound by any stays, for as those who build circular domes, unless they bind the fastening of the central top, the whole falls at once, so also the circle of the world, which we see to be brought together in so graceful a form, if it were not made at once and under the influence of a single forth-putting of divine energy by the power of a creator, but by atoms gradually concurring and constructing it, not as reason demanded, but as fortuitous issue befell, how did it not fall down and crumble to pieces before it could be brought together and fastened? And further I ask this, what is the pavement on which the foundations of such an immense mass are laid? And again, what you call the pavement on which it does rest? And again, that other, what supports it? And so I go on asking until the answer comes to nothing and vacuity. But if anyone says that the atoms of a fiery quality, being joined together, formed a body, and because the quality of fire does not tend downwards but upwards, that the nature of fire always pushing upwards supports the mass of the world placed upon it, to this we answer, how could atoms of a fiery quality, which always make for the highest place, descend to the lower, and be found in the lowest place of all, so as to form a foundation for all? Whereas rather the heavier qualities, that is, the earthy or watery, always come before the lighter, as we have said. Hence also they assert that the heaven as a higher structure is composed of fiery atoms, which are lighter and always fly upwards. Therefore the world cannot have foundations of fire or any other, nor can there be any association or compacting of the heavier atoms with the lighter, that is, of those which are already borne downward, with those that are always fly upward. Thus it is sufficiently shown that the bodies of the world are consolidated by the union of atoms, and that insensible bodies, even if they could by any means concur and be united, could not give forms and measures to bodies, form limbs, or affect qualities, or express quantities, all which therefore by their exactness attest to the hand of a maker and show the operation of reason, which I call the Logos and Yahweh. But someone will say that these things are done by nature. Now in this, the controversy is about a name. For while it is evident that it is a work of mind and reason, what you call nature, I call Yahweh the Creator. It is evident that neither the species of bodies arranged with so necessary distinctions, nor the faculties of mind, or could have been made by irrational and senseless work. But if you regard the philosophers as fit witnesses, Plato testifies concerning these things in the Timaeus, where in a discussion of the making of the world, he says, whether it has existed always or has a beginning, and decides that it was made. For, says he, it is visible and palatable and corporeal, but it is evident that all things which are of this sort have been made. But what has been made has doubtless an author by whom it is made. This maker and father of all, however, it is difficult to discover, and when discovered it is impossible to declare him to be vulgar. Such is the declaration of Plato. But though he and the other Greek philosophers have chosen to be silent about the making of the world, would it not be manifest to all who have any understanding? For what man is there, having even a speck of sense, who, when he sees a house having all things necessary for useful purpose, its roof fashioned in the form of a globe, painted with various splendor and diverse figures, adorned with large and splendid lights, who is there, I say, that seeing such a structure would not immediately pronounce that it was constructed by a most wise and powerful artificer? And so, who can be found so foolish as, when he gazes up at the fabric of heaven, perceives the splendor of the sun and moon, and sees the courses and beauty of the stars, and their paths assigned to them by fixed laws and periods, will not cry out that these things are made, not so much by a wise and rational artificer, but as by wisdom and reason itself? But if you would rather have the opinions of the others of the Greeks philosophers, and you have acquainted with mechanical science, you are of course familiar with what is their deliverance concerning the heavens. For they suppose a sphere, equally rounded in every direction and looking indifferently to all points, and at equal distances in all directions from the center of the earth, and so stable by its own symmetry that its perfect equality does not permit it to fall off on any side, and so the sphere is sustained, although supported by no prop. Now the fabric of the world really has this form, the divine work is evident in it. But if, as others think, the sphere is placed upon the waters and supported by them, or floating in them, even so the work of a great contriver is shown in it. So, in other words, NazActs is saying that they don't know. They don't know if the world is a globe, they don't know if the world is flat, but either way, it shows the presence of a creator, regardless of which type of formation the world has. But lest the assertion may seem doubtful respecting things which are not manifest to all, let us come to those things which nobody is ignorant. Who disposed the courses of the stars with so great reason, ordained their rising and setting, and appointed to each one to accomplish the circuit of the heavens in certain and regular times? Who assigned to some to be always approaching to the setting, and others to be returning to the rising? Who put a measure upon the courses of the sun, that he might mark out by his diverse motions hours and days and months and changes of seasons, that he might distinguish by a sure measurement of his course, now winter, then spring, summer, and afterwards autumn, but always by the same changes of the year, complete the circuit with variety without confusion? Who, I say, would not pronounce that the director of such order is the very wisdom of God? And these things we have spoken according to the relations given us by the Greeks respecting the science of the heavenly bodies. But what of those things also which we see on the earth or in the sea? are we not plainly taught that not only the work but also the providence of God is in them? For whereas there are on the earth lofty mountains in certain places, the object of this is that the air being compressed and confined by them through the appointment of God may be forced and pressed into winds, which by which fruits may germinate, and the summer heat may be moderated when the Pleiades glow, fired by the blaze of the sun. But if you say, why that blaze of the sun, that moderating should be required, how then should fruits be ripened which are necessary for the uses of men? But observe this also, that at the meridian axis, where the heat is the greatest, there is no great collection of clouds, nor an abundant fall of rain, lest disease should be produced among the inhabitants. For watery clouds, if they are acted on by rapid heat, render the air impure and pestilential. And the earth also, receiving the warm rain, does not afford nourishment to the crops, but destruction. In this, who can doubt that there is the working of divine providence? In short, Egypt, which is scorched with the heat of Ethiopia in its neighborhood, lest its air should be incurably vitiated by the effects of the showers, its plains do not receive rain furnished from them from the clouds, but as it were an earthly shower from the overflow of the Nile. What shall we say of fountains and rivers which flow with perpetual motion into the sea? And by the divine providence neither does their abundant supply fail, nor does the sea, though it receives so great quantities of water, experience any increase, but both these elements which contribute to it and those which are thus contributed remain in the same proportion. But you say to me, the salt water naturally consumes the fresh water which is poured into it. Well, in this is manifest the work of providence, that it made that element salt, into which it turned the courses of all the waters which it had provided for the use of men, so that through so great spaces of time the channel of the sea has not been filled, and produced a deluge destructive to the earth and to men. Nor will anyone be so foolish as to think that this so great reason and so great providence has been arranged by irrational nature. But what shall I say of plants, and what of animals? Is it not providence that has ordained that plants, when they decay by old age, should be reproduced by the suckers of the seeds which they have themselves produced, and animals by propagation? And by a certain wonderful dispensation of providence, milk is prepared in the udders of the dams for the animals before they are born, and as soon as they are born, with no one to guide them, they seek out the store of nourishment provided for them. And not only males are produced, but females also, and by this means of both the race may be perpetuated. But lest this should seem, as some think, to be done by a certain order of nature and not by the appointment of the Creator, he has, as a proof and indication of his providence, ordained a few animals that preserve their stock on the earth in an exceptional way. For example, the crow conceives through the mouth, and the weasel brings forth through the ear, and some birds, such as hens, sometimes produce eggs conceived by wind or dust. Other animals convert the male into the female and change their sex every year, as hares and hyenas, which they call monsters. Others spring from the earth and get their bodies from it, as moles. Others from ashes and vipers, and others from putrefying flesh, as wasps from horse flesh, bees from ox flesh, others from cow dung, as beetles, others from herbs, as the scorpion from the basil, and again herbs from animals, as parsley and asparagus from the horn of the stag and the she-goat. So obviously that last paragraph was some pretty unscientific type of understanding of animal biology. It reminds me of the Gospel of Barnabas, or the letter of Barnabas, where he says some similar claims about the reproductive systems of animals. So, a lot of this stuff that we read in these various texts that have been passed down to us, a lot of this stuff is obviously not scientific. There was a process as people went through and learned more about science and developed better research methods and such, and so some of this stuff is obviously not true. The very idea that there were only 4 elements in the earth and that these 4 elements made up everything else. That's, of course, been proven false by chemistry and other scientific pursuits. So, when you encounter stuff like this, on one hand, it obviously shows you, or should show you, that not every text that is written, that is considered Scripture, not every text is written by God, as we were taught in church. But what was the purpose for which it was written? Was it written to teach us science, or was it written to teach us about God? So even though the science itself may not be sound at all, like, you can still use the same reasoning to make the point that they make now. Like, you could almost rewrite this, describing all the scientific discoveries that have been made, and use that to acknowledge the fact that it obviously points to a creator. That matter doesn't just form living vessels and planetary systems and things just out of nothing. That there has to be a creator. Like, you could take a bunch of elements and just mix them together and leave them sitting in a pot somewhere, and you could leave it sitting there for thousands and millions of years. It's not going to form life. Just the mere presence of life indicates that there was a creator that created the life. So anyway, we're up to chapter 26. I think this is a good place to stop. We went through chapter 25 today, so we'll pick it up at 26 next time. Thank you for listening. Shalom.